welcome into the Auburn Podcast. Painter Sharpless, Zac Blackerby hanging out with you. Zac, it's been a good week for Auburn in many ways. We're going to focus on football today, but we will talk a little Auburn basketball at the end of the podcast. We want to talk first about the linebacker core and what Auburn is losing, because last year, really the last 3 seasons, that's been a strength of the team, and last year with Deshaun Davis and Darrell Williams and even Montavious Atkinson, you just sort of felt good about the unit entering 2019. Now, fresh faces in that group that will likely include KJ Britt, who will fill in, I would imagine.
Say his full name, please.
Downhill Britt.
Thank you.
I appreciate you making sure that we got that.
Accountability.
Yeah, that's important. And then Chandler Wooten, I imagine, in a lot of ways, when you look at him, they have done it. Travis Williams and Kevin Steele have done a nice job of molding him into a similar player, I think, when you look at his body and his skill set as Darrell Williams. So those two, of course, will get the bulk of the snaps. And then I think you've got Owen Pappoe as your third linebacker. Your thoughts?
You think he's the third linebacker?
I think he will be. Yes.
I think he starts. Maybe not in spring, but I think he starts
by
this season.
End of the season, even at the beginning.
I think he starts against Oregon.
Wow.
I think it's him and KJ. All right, if they start in a nickel, and then I think you mentioned the three I agree with. If they go base. And
then Zacoby McClain is interesting. I think they really like the upside, the athleticism he brings. That's an interesting take, though, about Pappoe. And I can see reason for it. I mean, Deshaun Davis himself, right before he left, talked about 2 players very highly. One of them was Joey Gatewood, and one of them was Owen Pappoe.
I'll tell you what, though, a guy I'm excited about, and I'm going to say 2, and it's guys that we've seen nothing on, but Michael Harris, had a redshirt year for his true freshman season. I'm curious to see what he does. I mean, you look at his size, he's listed as 6'3", just under 219 or 220. I mean, that's kind of what you want. I'm kind of in the mindset now where, I want the linebackers, if I'm a defensive coordinator, I want my linebackers to be long and be able to cover ground quickly. And, I think this age of, the 6'4", 240-pound linebacker, I think you're starting to see that go away. It's needed. Maybe not as a starter. You need it in certain situations as far as emphasizing stopping the run. On 3rd and 2, you may want to put that guy in there. But I think, from top to bottom, you want these guys that are between 6'2", 6'3", 6'4". If you can get a guy taller than that, that's great. But and around 220 pounds, just because you have that ability, that mobility. They typically seem to be better in coverage. They're more athletic and probably have a quicker burst as far as rushing the passer. I mean, I just think the upside for that style of linebacker has a higher ceiling. So I'm a big fan of Michael Harris and what he can bring. I mean, and you look at KJ Britt, 6 foot 228. So, I mean, 6 foot 230. A little bit shorter, a little bit more bulky. But, I mean, we've heard nothing but good things about KJ Downhill Britt.
You listed a lot of the physical traits that these guys have, and I think that there's a lot of upside to them. What are the voids that you think Deshaun Davis, Darrell Williams, and Montavious Atkinson leave? I think the first one, the most obvious one,
is between the ears, I think.
Yeah, then the experience. I mean, simply the amount of games they played and the games they played together.
Right. Deshaun Davis's his play recognition was top notch. I mean, he knew what the play was probably before it was snapped, and he was able to put himself in good situations. That's something you've got to learn how to do. You don't do that unless you're a very, very special player. Now, a lot of things we heard about Owen Pappoe, I think he can do that. And with good coaching, Travis Williams has hit the ground running, as I believe he's one of the better assistant coaches in the conference. And I think Gus Malzahn and a lot of Auburn folks would tell you kind of the same thing. But, yeah, I mean, I think the biggest disparity, I mean, you mentioned it, is experience, and a lot of that comes from muscle memory. You see certain things, and so you just automatically react. But I think some of it is leadership in the linebacker room, and how you watch tape, I think is important. I think it's very clear that Deshaun Davis was very, very good at that. And, just having these conversations in the locker room and in the linebacker room, that's what Auburn's going to miss. I mean, we talked about, leadership off the field with some of the guys. I believe it was on yesterday's edition of the Auburn podcast. But another guy, Painter, that I think is interesting is Josh Marsh. And you're starting to see him kind of garner some talk just on Auburn Twitter and some message boards. But another guy that's kind of in that size of frame that I like. 6'2", 217 pounds is what he's listed at right now. And when he signed, and it kind of came out of nowhere, or when he committed, it kind of came out of nowhere. But he had good size and good speed. And to me, he kind of looks like Rudy Ford to me. I kind of get the feeling that Auburn may use him as a guy, that nickel position, or maybe if they want to go dime and add another defensive back on the field and kind of put him in the box. A physical guy that can cover a lot of ground quickly and has just enough size where a guard's not going to totally wipe him out of a play. But if he has proper coaching and good, quick first step and good reaction time, I think he's a guy that could really surprise some people this year.
And you look at what Auburn lost in terms of productivity. Deshaun Davis, 116 tackles, 15 for loss, more than 3 sacks. Darrell Williams, 74 tackles, 7 for loss. He added a sack. And then Atkinson, you talked about some pass coverage a moment ago, 41 tackles, 1 for a loss. But also, a lot of what he did was a little bit speedier, a guy who at one point transitioned, they thought, to play safety. So I think there's a lot that this unit will have to learn from.
Yeah.
I think that also one of the things that's a benefit for Auburn is how good the defensive line will be. We've talked about that some here on the Auburn podcast this week. That, I think, gives those linebackers cushion until maybe the 4th or 5th game of the season, when you would like to think that they would settle in as a unit when they've got a couple of weeks of playing under their belt. Right,
because here's the thing. I mean, if they get blocked, if someone's going at KJ downhill bridge, or if someone's blocking Owen Papo, and they're blocking straight free, that means either Derek Brown or Marlon Davidson, or one of these big guys up front that's extremely talented, they're all getting singled.
Look, right?
They're all getting singled. And Derek Brown and Marlon Davidson, those guys need to win those.
I like my odds there, too.
Yeah.
If I'm Rodney Gardner, when I've got one-on-one matchups with a potential top 10 draft pick, and Nick Coe and Marlon Davidson will certainly be drafted.
Yeah, and I didn't even say Nick Coe. I mean, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think that's the projection to me. I think while it's the biggest question mark on the defense side of the ball, optimism should probably be what you feel for this linebacker group. I think also it will be interesting to see if there's a breakdown at some point. I think there will be. Auburn got so accustomed to having a guy like Deshaun Davis, who you said in between the ears was so sound and able to get people lined up properly and knew what was coming. And you wonder if there will be a noticeable drop-off. Maybe there won't be. But I think that you could expect that to happen some, especially early in the season.
Yeah, early on, I agree with you. I think communication is going to be key. And, I think with the way this coaching staff works, especially defensively, I mean, I could see Kevin Steele kind of coming out and just making everything as simple as possible for these guys, and I think naturally someone's going to step up as the vocal leader, as kind of the leader of as far as X's and O's, the quarterback on the defense. That's going to naturally happen with someone.
Hope that's KJ Britt if he's going to be the
guy.
I mean, and like leaders don't necessarily choose to be leaders. I think it's ideal when you can match it between a willingness to do it, but also your performance meets it somewhere. Like on some level, to be a leader, you need to be an effective player also. But because of the position he plays, I feel like KJ Britt, it would be nice if he would. And we know Deshaun Davis was certainly a vocal player. And here's another positive. Chandler Wooten, a junior, KJ Britt, a junior. They've had 2 years to be groomed for this.
Yeah. And I think you can argue that the biggest upside for Chandler Wooten is his Twitter handle. At It's Me Wu Tang. I'm all about it.
So shall we? Let's take a look. I don't disagree with you. Let's take a look also at why the secondary isn't getting enough love this season. It is a group that I think has probably not been talked about as much because it didn't have a ton of depth last year. There was at least some inexperience. Now that's changed. You do lose Jamel Dean, whose draft stock probably rose the most out of anyone during the NFL Combine for Auburn. But you've got a really solid core, I think, of players that, again, will benefit from having one of the best defensive lines in the country. The outlook, I think, of Javaris Davis, Jeremiah Denson, Daniel Thomas, Noah Igbenogany in year 2. Jordan Peters, a guy that I think is a solid player, will never be a superstar but can do a variety of things. Christian Tutt is expected to step up for Jamel Dean. Smoke Monday had a great freshman year, as did Jamie Sherwood. This is a unit to me that probably could stand to get a little bit more attention heading into the season. Now, what you might say to counter that is that there were some disappointing moments for this secondary last season.
Yeah. I mean, and it only takes, one bad blown coverage to totally change the outlook of, how you performed as a secondary. That's just kind of part of the job. You blow one assignment as a corner and people are pointing at you saying, what in the world were you doing? You just get so exposed. You're out there on an island. But the improvement that Noah Igbenogany had throughout the season last year was crazy. It was crazy. I mean, I expect him to have a Carlton Davis-like season. I mean, I really think he's going to be a stud. I think the NFL teams are going to absolutely love him when this season is over, should he go to the NFL draft. That long, big physical frame, solid footwork, and, you just kind of heard chatter that he's picking this stuff up so quick, for him to just be a natural athlete. Both of his parents were Olympians. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you as far as, no one's really talking about this defensive backfield. And I think it's because you kind of know what you're going to get. I think you're going to get some solid players. I think Jeremiah Dinson coming back is great. I mean, obviously, the upperclassmen you have coming back are good. And you got a good mixture of upperclassmen and then
some young talent.
Yeah, some true sophomores and some true freshmen in there that people are excited to see. But, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of right there with you. My thing is, and, I've caught a lot of flack for saying this before, but I'm standing by it. As far as position groups from top to bottom on college football teams, I think for the most part, defensive backs are the least important position group in college football, just because of the lack of pass experience and pass threats. I mean, obviously, it's good when you have good ones, but I just think, quarterback playing college football as a whole isn't good. So I think that's why you don't really hear a whole lot of that from any teams with good defensive backs, unless you have, really.
Yeah, LSU's at one that it comes to mind. It's like, okay, they've had an unusual amount of good defensive backs.
Yeah, and they usually have a guy. They usually have a guy that's like, all right, well, that guy's a top 5 draft pick. And like Auburn doesn't have that, I don't think. Can Noah Igbenogany play his way into the first round? Possibly. I think he possibly could. But yeah, I mean, I think we're in agreement on everything with the defensive backfield.
Javaris Davis, a senior, Jeremiah Dinson, a senior, Daniel Thomas, a senior, Noah Igbenogany, and Jordan Peters, juniors, Smoke Monday, Jamian Sherwood, sophomores, Christian Tutt, a sophomore. I like that unit a lot. The experience, the youth, the guys like Smoke, like Sherwood, like Tutt that got thrust into those roles will be much better this year.
Do you remember how hard I was on Daniel Thomas going into last year?
Yeah, and I think you issued an apology to him, and he accepted it, right?
Yeah, he tweeted or he posted on Instagram because I posted the apology letter that I wrote for him and read out, and he's like, "It's all good, fam," or something like that. Right. So yeah, he's a friend of the show.
Speaking of, and then we'll move off of this subject, guys. You were talking about corners in the NFL, defensive backs in the NFL. Jamel Dean, how big's that loss in your mind? I think we saw how much of a freak he is athletically.
Let me ask you this: who's the number 2 corner?
Right now or last year?
Right now. I mean, I think last year, it's clear it was Noah, but I mean, what is it this year?
I think Tutt steps up for Dean and that Noah is the number 2 corner this year.
So I think as far as number 1 impacting a game, I think Noah Igbenogany can take that step to do what Jamel Dean last year. My question is, and I don't have the answer, can Tutt be a good number 2? I think that's where the disparity is. Not at the number 1 corner, but at the number 2 corner.
I'm sorry, I didn't follow you. Do you think Noah will be the number 1 corner this season, or do you think Tutt?
Yeah, okay. For sure.
Okay,
for sure. So I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of drop off at the number 1 corner spot because Igbenogany's taken that step. It's what's the difference between the number 2 corner spot this year versus what Noah did last year. I mean, it's just a hypothetical. I mean, I don't think we can know the answer.
Yeah.
But can Christian Tutt be as good as what Noah was last year? Like, I don't think so if I had to guess, but I think that's what the issue is.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit more optimistic about Tutt's upside than you are, but I think that's a good point.
And please understand, like I don't think he's going to be bad.
Right.
I think he's going to be a solid young corner in this league that's eventually going to be very, very good. And I think he's better, week 8 than he is week 1. He just kind of strikes me as that kind of player. So I'm not saying Auburn is in trouble because Christian Tutt may start at number 2 corner. I think he's going to be absolutely fine. And I think the safety situation at Auburn is better than it was a year ago.
Definitely.
So, I think, can Jeremiah Dinson and, some of the other guys, Daniel Thomas, can they cover that up a little bit? And I think they can.
Lastly, on football, Alec Jackson, a redshirt sophomore who appeared in 11 games as a defensive tackle last season, is listed as an offensive lineman on Auburn's official roster. He also changed jersey numbers from 92 to 65. 3-star defensive lineman out of Jeff Davis in 2017. Redshirted his freshman year, made his debut against Alabama State last season. 6'5", just under 300 pounds. I think here the issue is this is great. It's fine. Auburn has a shortage at the tackle spot, especially after 2019 when you'll see the departure of a few players, particularly Prince Tega and Jack Driscoll. Don't know if this move is as much for this season as it is for them, the coaches looking ahead to the future. I think the overarching theme here is that Auburn could have a real issue on the offensive line in a season.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't get the vibe that this move is Prince Tega, right? Do you get that vibe at all?
Yeah, you're trying to take a really athletic guy and mold him into something with the right body type to a player with Grimes, who's been applauded as being a very good line coach and someone who can teach guys to be technically sound. So, yeah, I think that there is definitely some similarities in the move.
I mean, I'm saying though, do you think it's going to work out like the Tega move did? Because I'm not.
I don't know if he has the athleticism of Tega. I mean, he's a little bit smaller, but 6'5", 297 is, you're fine with that. I guess I'm a little bit less optimistic about it, but also maybe I'm saying that with last season under our belt, it's easier to say now that you've seen Prince Tega be one of the better pass blockers in the league than, let's say, the week after the Clemson game if you'd asked me the same question.
Yeah. I mean, Tega, just kind of, I know you followed NFL free agency a decent amount, and it's one of my favorite times of the year, just kind of, the first few weeks of free agency, it's crazy. But, like Trent Brown became the highest paid offensive lineman for a few minutes. I think somebody else topped him in the free agency. I could be wrong, but me kind of following the Patriots moved, and I was just like, what?
I couldn't believe he made.
Yeah, I was like, he was okay.
He had a good playoff run, right?
Yeah, he was great in the playoffs, and I think that's kind of the argument for. But I mean, just that big of a cap hit, I mean, it is kind of crazy for him just to be the most paid offensive lineman ever is odd to me. But when you look at Tega and you look at Trent Brown, I don't see a whole lot of differences from like a prospect analysis standpoint. A guy that, I think is for him to be as good of a pass blocker as he was with that size and, just him getting better and better, I think that's going to be a problem for opposing defenses this season. I think if he can get a little bit better in the run blocking game, and it's all about leverage. It's all about where to put that size and all that force, because he's got plenty of it.
Yes.
And just kind of seeing him line up with these other huge offensive linemen, it's like he's just so much bigger than the rest of those guys. I think the NFL is going to love him. And, what a strong selling point that they should be able to have in this recruiting cycle. Hey, we're about to lose our left tackle. I think he's going to be a top 50 draft pick. We need you to come and play where he was. So I think they're going to have a little bit more of an argument in bringing those guys in this year. Because if not, I 100% agree with you, because there is going to be an issue moving forward at tackle.
Want to tell you right now about our item of the day at Fanatics.
Fanatics item of the day. Let's get it.
And I like the choice here, Zach Blackerby, an Auburn basketball shirt in theme. The Tigers, of course, if you're listening to this podcast, it's Friday.
Yes.
So they're going to take on South Carolina this afternoon. Auburn just beat Missouri, got their first SEC tournament basketball win since 2015. So in a celebratory fashion, get yourself a nice navy blue. The material here looks excellent, and I like the spacing of the word basketball. I think it's really nicely done. I actually like that logo, or not logo, but that font more than what they've got the Auburn in. And, of course, the Auburn looks excellent.
I love hearing you talk about this every single day. I think you do a great job describing these items, the Fanatic item of the day, as well as pitching it. I love it. I absolutely love it.
I thought I would get a carry-on jersey yesterday because I don't actually have any, like, new-ish jerseys. All my jerseys are from players of way past. But this shirt's looking comfortable. It might be calling my name. And, hey, the price is excellent. So check that out at Fanatics. Let's dive back in to some basketball talk before we dip out of here, Zach. As I mentioned, Auburn getting a much-needed, I think, win. And I think that win against Missouri alleviates a little pressure for Auburn. They come into this tournament now against South Carolina, having already won a game, playing on the court, sort of shaking off those nerves. They're on a roll right now. And South Carolina, frankly, is playing for their tournament lives. I think the only way that they make the tournament, unless I'm mistaken, is that they would win it.
Which is kind of weird because, just how seeding has fallen. But, I mean, non-conference is important. That's where you get a lot of those quality wins and kind of build up your RPI and all that. And Bruce Pearl's been very adamant on doing that.
So while I don't think that South Carolina is a great team, they did beat Auburn earlier in the year. That's well documented. Chris Silva absolutely went off, 32 points, 14 rebounds. If they can just slow him down and play a reasonably clean game, I mean, if you're talking about what they did in the ballpark of the Tennessee game, 5 turnovers, I feel very good about them winning this game. Now, that's going to be hard to replicate, but I think this is a game that Auburn wins, and I think they win one more in this tournament and roll into the NCAA tournament with a lot of momentum.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, me, you, Justin Ferguson, and Ben Wolk on our 10 Questions podcast earlier in the week, I asked you guys, who leads in postseason points for Auburn, and all 3 of you guys said different names, and I believe you said Bryce Brown, and I agree with you. And I think it's best for Auburn if Bryce Brown leads in points. And you saw that last night. He scored 17, made 5 threes. Seemed like all of them were in the span of like 20 seconds. It was kind of remarkable. But I think this team now I've kind of said the last 3 or 4 months, this team goes as far as Chuma. I think it goes as far as what Bryce's hot and cold streak does. I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, and Bryce, and I think also on top of Bryce having a cold first half, Auburn finding a way to win without Jared having his best game and feeling like Jared needed to score basically double-digit points has to be a shot in the arm. And how about Horace Spencer having
He's
more
a senior.
than 10 points?
That is a senior moment, man.
If you're going to have players like that off the bench, if him and Malik Dunbar and Javon McCormick are going to step up their play, that is going to take so much pressure off of Jared and Bryce and Chuma. And Javon did that in the Tennessee game, and then Horace did it, of course, against Missouri.
And D'Angelo had a pulse for the first time in several games. So I love that for him. I know what he's going through. It has to be extremely frustrating for him. So that's exciting. So we'll touch on the SEC tournament pretty much the majority of the podcast on Monday. So real quick before we wrap up, I want to urge folks to go visit our Patreon page. Visit the show notes, and we'll put the link there. Just support the show. And a lot of folks saying, hey, next time I get paid, I'll sign up. You do not get charged until the first of the month. It charges you on the first of every month. So please do not let that get in your way. All right, Painter, wrap it up for us.
This has been another edition of the Auburn Podcast.